Qatar spent an estimated $220 billion preparing to host a single month of football in 2022. That is more than every previous World Cup in history combined. 8 years earlier, Brazil built one of the most expensive stadiums on earth in its capital city. Within a year of the final whistle, the government was parking city buses in it. Every 4 years, a different country wins the right to host the World Cup. The celebrations look identical, and with remarkable consistency, so does what follows: a mountain of debt, a handful of empty stadiums, and a bill the public pays for decades. Here is the strange part. These are not foolish governments. They hire professional economists. They see what happened to the last host. And they do it anyway. That is not a coincidence. And it is not stupidity. It is the same three-phase pattern that builds every market bubble: accumulation, euphoria, distribution, wearing a national jersey. History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. Welcome to Hidden Patterns. Today we map the boom-bust cycle of markets onto the World Cup, show you who the smart money actually is, and why the tournament happening right now is the first real test of a different model. If you watched our video on the three-phase pattern behind every market move, you know the sequence: accumulation, manipulation, distribution. A World Cup runs the same script. The phases just have different names: the bid, the build, and the bill. Phase 1, the bid. It happens quietly, years before anyone pays attention, exactly like accumulation. A small group commits the country to a position while the public barely notices, and the entry price is always understated. Every modern World Cup has blown past its original budget, not by percentages, but by multiples. The bid is a low ball by design, because the real number would never survive a public vote. That is accumulation. A large position, built in silence, at a price the crowd doesn't understand yet. Phase 2, the build. Now the position goes public, and the euphoria begins. Construction cranes fill the skyline. Billions in borrowed money flow through the economy, and here is the trick: that spending shows up as GDP growth. Debt dressed up as prosperity. The economist Hyman Minsky described exactly this. When the numbers keep rising, everyone becomes convinced the risk has disappeared, and questioning it becomes almost impossible. The project is no longer a budget item. It is national pride. Doubting the spend feels like doubting the country. If you have ever tried to call the top of a bull market, you know that feeling. The euphoria is the point where the cost becomes invisible. Phase 3, the bill. The final whistle blows. The tournament leaves, the tourists leave, the broadcast money leaves, and the host is left holding the physical position. Stadiums built for 80,000 people, in cities that will never fill them again. In markets, we have a name for the person left, holding an asset nobody wants to buy. The World Cup just builds that position out of concrete. Now, this sounds like an accusation. It isn't. No conspiracy is required, no villain twirling a mustache. The mechanics produce this outcome on their own, the same way they do in markets. Whenever euphoria peaks, someone commits capital at the top, and someone else collects the proceeds and exits. So ask the question we ask on every chart: who is on the other side of this trade? Look at the structure the way you would look at a market. On one side, the host country. It signs the infrastructure bill, the stadiums, the airports, the rail lines, all of it financed, most of it justified by a one-month event. On the other side, FIFA. FIFA sells the hosting rights, collects the broadcast revenue, collects the sponsorship revenue, roughly $7.5 billion in the Qatar cycle, and pays for essentially none of the infrastructure. When the tournament ends, FIFA exits with the cash and moves to the next host. One party holds the liquid asset, the other holds the concrete. On a chart, we would not hesitate to name these roles. FIFA is the operator distributing at the top. The host is the crowd, buying the peak with leverage, and the aftermath looks exactly like a post-bubble chart. Brazil 2014, around $15 billion in total spending. The stadium in Brasilia, over $500 million, became a bus depot. The stadium in Manaus was built in the middle of the rainforest for 4 tournament matches. During the run-up, more than 1 million Brazilians marched in the streets. The banners asked for hospitals built to the same standard as the stadiums. South Africa 2010. Cape Town's stadium cost roughly $600 million to build, and to this day, it costs the city more to maintain than it earns. In market terms, that is not just a losing position, it is a position with negative carry and no bid. And if you want to see how long the tail of this trade can run, Montreal's 1976 Olympic Stadium took 30 years to pay off. Locals stopped calling it the Big O and started calling it the Big O. Economists have studied mega events for decades, and the finding is remarkably consistent. The lasting economic boost the bids promise almost never shows up in the data. The euphoria is real. The legacy on the balance sheet is debt. The bid, the build, the bill. Accumulation, euphoria, distribution. The same 3 phases we mapped on Bitcoin and the S&P, running through national budgets. Subscribe to Hidden Patterns, because the next section covers the exceptions and what the tournament happening right now is quietly testing. Here is what makes the pattern precise rather than cynical. The hosts that escaped it all broke the same phase. The United States in 1994 built essentially nothing. Every match played in existing stadiums. Germany in 2006 mostly renovated what it already had. Those 2 tournaments came closest to actually breaking even. The damage was never caused by hosting. It was caused by borrowing to build at the peak of euphoria, by entering the position at the top. And the pattern is not unique to football, because the mechanics aren't about football. Athens spent around €9 billion hosting the 2004 Olympics. Many of those venues sit derelict today, and within 5 years, Greece stood at the epicenter of the European debt crisis. The Olympics didn't cause that crisis, but it was the same trade in miniature. Borrow for glory, host the party, inherit the bill. Same structure in a coin, a stock, a house, a stadium. Euphoria converts debt into pride, and pride into concrete. And concrete has no sell button. Which brings us to right now. The 2026 World Cup, the one playing out as you watch this, is the first hosted across 3 countries, and almost every match is being played in stadiums that already existed. American NFL arenas, Mexican and Canadian grounds decades old. The biggest line items are security and transport, not construction. In other words, for the first time in decades, a host entered the trade without buying the top. Whether the pattern still finds a way to extract its bill through overruns in everything else is the live experiment. Watch the city budgets, not the scoreboard. So here is the reframe. The next time you see a country celebrating a winning bid for a World Cup, an Olympics, any mega event, Translate the image. Someone just committed to buying the top, with borrowed money, in front of cameras, and the seller is standing right next to them, applauding. That feeling of national certainty, this will transform us, the world will finally see us, is the same feeling we broke down in our video on market tops. It isn't a reason to celebrate or to sneer. It is data. Euphoria is always data, and the lens works far beyond sport. Anytime a mega project dominates the news, ask the two chart questions: who books the revenue and who signs the debt? The answers almost always sit on opposite sides of the trade. The full three-phase pattern, accumulation, manipulation, distribution, is broken down in the video on screen now. The emotional side, the euphoria that makes buying the top feel safe, is in the video below it. Which country do you think has actually handled hosting well? Tell me in the comments. The counterexamples are where this gets interesting. Subscribe to Hidden Patterns. I'll see you there. Hidden Patterns, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.